Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about emerging trends and High School of Business. This is Lisa Berkey, the Program Director for High School of Business. And I'm here with two of my co-workers today, Holly Atha and Kristen Auletto. And Holly and Kristen, would you like to just introduce yourselves and tell the teachers what you do here at MBA Research, please?
Sure. I've been with MBA Research for almost 2 years, and I work with Beth Osteen on writing and researching standards, and I also work with the business community in a business engagement capacity where we help connect business leaders with educators.
I'm Kristen, and I've been here for about 1.5 years now. And the majority of my time I spend working on the LAPs that you're probably familiar with, writing the content, and also working a lot on the exam questions as well.
All right, so you can hear how their work touches lots of things that you do in High School of Business. And one of those we're going to be talking about today, and that is the research that MBA Research does to develop the learning standards that are used within the High School of Business program. And so Holly is going to start us off by getting you familiar with how that process works.
All right, great. Thank you, Lisa. So one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that we have a lot of influence from the business community for our standards and for all the work that we do on the curriculum, to make sure that we have an understanding of what it is that business is expecting from the workforce, not only as they enter the workforce, but all the way throughout their years in the workforce. So we work very closely with business groups across the United States to make sure that we can get that input. And one of the ways that we do that is by conducting focus groups or business panels. So in the past 1.5 years, we've been in a number of different states, including Iowa, Colorado, Kentucky, and Nebraska. And we have hundreds of different individuals who are leading business executives in the marketing, finance, and business management worlds. So what we do is we work with them to share our standards with them and get feedback about where they see we're on target and where they see things may need to shift a little bit. But another interesting thing that we do with them is we talk with them about trends that they're seeing in their work world every day that are changing the way that we do business. And actually with each group we probably spend about half the time that we're with them talking about those trends and trying to understand what those are, and sort of really diving deep with them on what those trends mean to their everyday work life, why they think things are changing, what they're going to do about it in their work world. And then we try to get different perspectives on that too from different participants and on different days. So the trends that we're going to talk about today are some of the trends that we've identified from focus groups that we've met across the country. And folks who are participating in those groups are from all different kinds of organizations, large and small mom and pop type businesses that maybe an owner is taking a day off to come, all the way from large corporations like Xerox or Fiserv or other organizations like that that are more known to us, that an individual is taking time, either a vacation or a personal day, to come and share their input. So that's a lot of the input that we use to learn and research trends that we're going to talk a little bit with you about today. One of the other ways that we get input from folks is from something that we have that's called an executive network. And as we're out meeting with different people, we ask them if they would like to sign up to participate in a survey once a month so that they can give us feedback on our standards or on other questions that we have around trends or other issues, so that, again, we can keep close to the business community and make sure that educators like yourselves can benefit from that information. Does that answer your question so far?
Yes,
Lisa?
definitely.
Okay. All right. And Kristen is going to talk a little bit about our research process in terms of the trends and the action briefs that we do.
Thank you, Holly. So as Holly was explaining, the ExecNet is one of the ways that we engage with the business community, and one of the things that we do to kind of build those relationships, as well as building relationships with some of our teachers, is putting out action briefs, which are short written reports about the trends that that we're focusing on. And so what we'll do with that process is we'll take the trends that we've gathered from our focus groups and from our conversations with members of the business community, and we will begin researching those trends. So we'll go to a variety of sources. We'll look online at web-based research sources such as newspapers and industry publications, academic journals. We'll look to textbooks. Sometimes we will communicate with industry experts in the field that's related to that trend, just so we can get some professional perspective from the people that are the most familiar with that topic. So we'll go through that research process, and then we'll compile all the different information that we've found and put it together and kind of summarize the topic, provide some background information, and then we will also provide some classroom implications so that teachers who are reading these action briefs can kind of take the information that we have compiled and use it to bring it into the classroom and communicate that trend to their students in a way that's relevant and engaging for those students. And then once we've kind of done the bulk of the writing process, we also have a member of our executive network review what we've written and researched. So that way we can engage someone who's a leader in the business community, receive feedback from him about what he thinks of what we've done, whether or not it accurately reflects his experiences, and then we will take that feedback and integrate it into our work, and then we send out those action briefs on a monthly basis so that all the members of the executive network as well as teachers can read that and kind of get a brief overview of these trends and how they can be brought into the classroom. So now we're going to go into talking about the trends in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to hand it off to Lisa, and she's going to introduce the first trend and talk about how it connects to a project in high school business.
All right, well, terrific. So as you can see, there is a lot of research and work that goes into every standard that's used in MBA Research curriculum, and those are kept current on an ongoing basis. We have a whole staff who work daily on making sure that the products that we provide to educators are current and are what industry says your students should be learning. So I hope that hearing about that process just helped to solidify your comfort level in knowing that the resources that you're using are what business says that your students should be learning. All right, so I want to let you know too that for the purpose of this web conference, you can use the chat box to type in questions, and we will be happy to answer your questions during this webinar. Let's go ahead and get started with trend number 1. All right, so I asked Holly and Kristen to take a look at the work that they've done recently, particularly with those action briefs that describe trends. And tell me which ones were the ones they found particularly interesting, and we worked together to determine which ones tied with the curriculum that you're already using in High School of Business. So you can see that trend number 1, emerging markets, that they're going to talk to you a little bit about, goes right with the China Dynasty Project in business economics. So this is information that you can share with your students right now if you're teaching business economics. All right, so Holly's going to talk about this one. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So just to be really open and honest here, we have so as we meet with our business folks, we get lots and lots of trends, long list of trends with sort of a paragraph description about the trend that's done in a report that we do to share with business people afterwards. So as we're going through and looking at different topics that we want to do each month, some of the topics are more interesting and maybe we know a little bit more about them before we get started. So emerging markets was one that I was assigned that I really didn't know a lot about. So it was very interesting in that respect. So I learned a lot about emerging markets during, what was it, like April 2016, I think. So the the description that I was given when I first started the assignment, that sort of was communicated by the business people who brought that up as a trend, was that emerging markets provide businesses with opportunities while challenging the United States superpower status. The continued growth may change how the U.S. companies need to operate in those markets. The growth is also leading to increasing income inequality in some emerging economies and provides a potential role for businesses to make contributions that may narrow these gaps. So the interesting thing about this description was that it talked a little bit about, you know, potentially implications of doing business in an emerging market, but it also kind of gave a nod to trying to understand what doing business in emerging markets might mean for that country and the people of that country, and also for the people of the United States as businesses shifted back and forth. So it was really interesting that the group of business folks who brought that up sort of added that extra angle to, so we know what it means for the business, but what does it mean for the country whose market is emerging, or the country, the United States, who maybe had the potential to have that business there but does no longer. So it really added an interesting flavor to doing a lot of the research. So kind of just a high-level overview is that we looked at sort of the opportunities that that can provide for businesses and looking at emerging markets, such as a greater global presence and potentially decreased manufacturing costs. But we also looked at a lot of the risks that come with doing business in emerging markets, such as understanding cultural differences. A lot of times emerging markets have a lot of political unrest. There's a whole different set of regulations to abide by, so we thought ours were complicated in the United States. Go to an emerging market, and you have to keep a handle on those too. And then also, obviously, rapidly changing economic conditions. So just sort of trying to point out, in terms of the workplace implications, some of the things to think about and consider when you're looking at doing business in an emerging market. And then, of course, also the brief really sort of explored, you know, corporate social responsibility when doing business on a global basis or in an emerging market, and really thinking carefully about what it means for that economy and the groups of people, and kind of got into a discussion in the action brief in terms of the haves and the have-nots and sort of what all that means. So as Kristen pointed out, we kind of have two sections to the action briefs. We do kind of a workplace implications, and we also do kind of a classroom implication. And that's really where you guys come in. And it's really kind of the most fun, but also the most challenging part of doing the action brief, because we're taking some topics that students may or may not find interesting on a natural basis and sort of trying to humanize them a little bit, sort of trying to find a way to make a student say, yes, I can see how this affects me, or I can see how it affects somebody who is similar to me, or, you know, sort of really trying to find a way to help them be interested in learning more about it. So that does add a little bit of a challenge to it. So when I was working on the emerging markets action brief, one of the countries I zeroed in on was Brazil. So if you remember back during last summer, they were having the Olympic Games in Brazil. And there was a lot of information on Brazil at that time in terms of some very interesting political things going on, but also just in terms of the Olympics and how they were dealing with making the arrangements for it, and things were very unsettled, you know, right up kind of until the very end. So one of the things we included in our classroom implications in that particular situation was a suggested assignment for students to learn more and to kind of watch and follow information and news about the Olympic Games, thinking that would kind of be the tie-in for them, but then to also kind of pay close attention to where they were being held and what issues were present in that country based on that. We also talked about helping students understand, again, the implications of business models, either here in the United States or in an emerging economy, and to kind of do a compare and contrast. And I think that's a little bit about what the China Dynasty assignment offers, is the chance to see, you know, what is involved in having the stuffed animal manufactured in the United States versus China. So really asking students to think, what are the differences and what are those things that we have to consider? And then the last thing that I found on that one that was kind of interesting was a resource online for something called Intergroup Monopoly. And that was a kind of adjusted Monopoly game to help students understand, as money and property were traded, how that affected different groups of people as a whole, which again was one of the tie-ins to looking at what it means when we do business in emerging markets. So that was kind of our attempt to try to get students interested in something that maybe some students naturally would be, but it might be a harder topic for others. Or maybe that was just me. So, any questions about that? Nothing's turned up in the chat box.
Oh, and Tracy's wondering, is there a link to the Intergroup Monopoly?
Oh, yeah, actually, I could provide that. Do you want me to get that while Kristen talks about hers, or should we just email it out afterwards?
We'll do a follow-up email.
Okay. Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks,
it is
Holly.
kind of interesting.
Yeah. All right, well, terrific. So in this trend, I think it's a really, it's a direct tie-in with China Dynasty and the project going on there. It also highlighted for me the importance of looking at some other countries too regarding current events as this project is going on. So the Olympics are perfect for that, Holly. That was a great example. And future Olympics too, and how those countries are selected ties into that. I know that that's been a hot topic lately with the Olympics just being not a profitable endeavor for most, and what that can really do to a country when they decide to pump all their resources into it. So
very true. And I have to admit, it was kind of addicting afterwards to kind of follow the aftermath of Brazil and watch what happened with all the venues, and so once you start tuning into it, which is hopefully what happens with students, they become interested and then continue to follow it. That's the hope anyway.
Right, and I think that in Sochi, for instance, you can go online and see what unfortunately happened to all of those things. They're covered in weeds and the like. So lots of great information on Olympics and former Olympic sites out on the internet that your students could take a look at. I think that's a great way of engaging them into a trend that, you're right, from if we just talk about it for what it is, doesn't sound too exciting, but really has a lot of different angles and depth that we can go into. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, trend number 2 we're going to talk about is the changing legal system. Now, this is also one that immediately makes students want to say, please tell me more. So, Kristen, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say about it. But this ties into the big squeeze, the third project in Principles of Business that talks about all the different factors that put a squeeze on businesses and demand their resources and attention. Kristen?
Thank you. So as Lisa said, the topic of legal issues that affect business is very broad, and it's also not the most exciting on the surface, but as I discovered when doing my research, it has a lot of implications that affect things that not only we do on a daily basis, but students do as well. So essentially what this trend is focused on is the way that both technology and globalization have really made legal issues much more complicated for businesses. When you were a small business owner in Ohio, for instance, several decades back, you pretty much only needed to know the laws that affected business in Ohio. But now, because of the way business is done, most businesses have to know the laws not only in other states, but also in other countries. So it's really changing the amount of time and effort that has to go into businesses' legal knowledge and the time they spend on that. And there's several different layers to this in different areas where legal issues come in. So a few that we touched on, one is intellectual property law. So the way that we create and distribute content has changed with social media and everyone having their own personal website. It's very easy to share content, to take someone else's content and share it. So it's really important to know how to give credit, when to give credit, and also who owns the content that you're putting on social media, for instance. One of the things that I uncovered dealt with LinkedIn and how if you read the terms of use that LinkedIn has, you might be surprised to know that what you post is actually owned by LinkedIn. So they have the right to do whatever they want with the content that you post. So you're kind of giving up some of your rights there, and most people are completely unaware of those laws. So that's one area that has changed a lot with technology. Another one is more broadly related to communications online, so issues such as reputation damage and defamation of businesses with websites like Yelp or even Google reviews. It's really easy for someone to post something about your business that may or may not be true and may or may not damage your business and hurt your reputation with customers. So but it's very hard to prosecute that, and it's very hard to kind of navigate the legal issues related to that. So businesses just have to be aware of that and kind of monitor it a little bit more than they did in the past. Another one that is very directly related to students, even though they might not realize it at first, is contracts. So entering into contracts online has been a new change. You can now sign things online, but those laws are constantly changing. There's even legislation that's, I believe, still going through Congress right now that deals with whether or not e-signatures are binding, what constitutes an e-signature, and that can become very complicated when it comes to business negotiations. So businesses have to be aware of how they negotiate online, how they're passing contracts back and forth, how they're tracking all of that. And then the final topic that we covered was data privacy. So there are tons and tons of laws, and again, still developing all the time, that deal with customers' data, people's data in general that they share online, what businesses are allowed to do with it, who they're allowed to share it with. And those laws are also very different between different countries. So it's very complicated, and it's important that businesses are constantly keeping up to date with those and thinking about those things in the digital space. So on the surface, these might not seem to be related to students directly, but when looking at the classroom implications, one of the things that we looked at was the issue of contracts and terms of service when using different applications or software. So for example, when a student downloads an app, they usually have to agree to certain terms of use that they probably don't read. They probably just scroll through it and click agree without even thinking twice. But they might not realize that that is actually a lot of times a legally binding thing that they are agreeing to, and that could potentially lead to trouble along the way. So just making students aware of that's something they should be considering is a good way to kind of engage them in this topic and show them how it affects their daily lives already. Again, another aspect that's relevant to them is social media. Obviously most, if not all, students are using social media or posting content on it every day and not thinking about, do they own that content, or does the social media platform own the content? What can that platform do with it? And they need to be careful about what they're posting, because they might think they have the ability to delete whatever they want whenever they want, but they might not. So just making them think a little bit more seriously about that in a legal sense is a good way to make this more relevant for them. And then finally, I came across a really good resource regarding the data privacy issue. So Lisa's going to pull that up now. So this is just a website that shows the degree of severity of data protection around the world in different countries. So you can see the red is the heaviest, and then the green is the most limited regulation and enforcement of data protection. So students might be interested to see which countries have the most, which have the least, and really think about how that could affect them, and how that can affect businesses when you're doing business in another country, or when you're maybe interacting with someone online in another country. Just being aware of how the laws can affect you and how you need to be careful with what data you're sharing. And just to kind of reiterate, a lot of students that have grown up with internet every single day might not even think about these issues and might not be aware of the laws that apply to them. So this is a good way you can compare different countries, and you can kind of read about the laws a little bit and just learn a little bit more about how those are changing over time, and see the need to check in every once in a while and see what laws have changed.
right, thank you, Kristen. That looks like a good site. I can see students taking a look at U.S. and China in that during the project in business econ as well. So a lot of different applications there for the changing legal system. There is teachers, you know, that throughout the Principles of Business course in particular, there are many performance indicators that have to do with legal issues. So I think that many of the things that Kristen said are going to be a good tie-in for you to get the students interested and engaged on a personal level with how these changing laws affect them. All right. Next up, instant gratification. I'm sure we never think about that, right, teachers, parents, etc. Even all of us. I think maybe we're all a little bit guilty about wanting that instant gratification anymore. So this one has a lot. I know this is one I didn't have any trouble coming up with examples for, but I'm excited to hear what Kristen has come up with on this one. The direct link for you is Photo Hounds, where the project that deals with paparazzi and students coming up with methods to keep the paparazzi at bay, away from movie stars. So Kristen is going to go ahead and share what she came up with for that.
Thank you. So the way this trend actually came about is at one of the focus groups with business professionals, there was a phrase being thrown around that was called the McDonald's Effect. And so we decided to look more into that, and what we came across is that this whole idea of the speed, efficiency, and customization of McDonald's and other fast food chains have really become the standard expectation that customers expect from businesses across the board. So no matter what the product is, no matter what size the business is, customers expect to get what they want, when they want it, and exactly the way they want it. So that has really started to affect all kinds of businesses, and it's really also not just related to the fast food model of business, but also, again, with the increased use of technology and smartphones that we use all the time, it's just very easy to access and obtain whatever you want, and it's really not difficult to do. So a lot of new business models have sprung out of this idea. So some of them that you're probably familiar with are Uber and Lyft in the place of hailing a taxi, or Grubhub and Postmates are services where you can order your food and have someone go drive and pick it up and bring it right to you. You can customize it exactly how you want it online. You never even have to place a phone call. You can even order your groceries online using various services. You can add what you want, and you never have to leave your apartment or your house. And services like Amazon have increasingly added more and more to make things even more convenient and more quick. So now they have their Amazon Prime Now service in most major cities, where you can order pretty much whatever you would want, and it will be at your house within 2 hours. So these kinds of expectations are making it very difficult for brick and mortar businesses to compete. So for example, if you need to buy some soap and shampoo, you could get dressed, drive in your car, find a parking spot, walk into the store and buy it, or you could simply pull up an app on your phone and order it and have it in the same amount of time. So that has really proven to be a challenge for existing businesses. So they've kind of had to find new ways to both personalize their products and make them customized for the customer's wants, and they've also had to make things quicker and keep up with shorter product life cycles rather. So that's really made things like agile processes more important. Companies are constantly looking for ways to reduce the time it takes to develop new products, to get things through the supply chain much quicker. And so that's the companies that have been able to adapt and do that have been the ones that have succeeded in terms of their ability to compete with these new business models. So that has continued to become more important for them to develop. And this idea has also affected businesses in terms of the job-seeking process. So the same mentality that affects customers and businesses also affects employers and future employees. So a lot of people now, when, especially new entry-level job seekers, when they go into an interview setting, they're expecting that the company is going to give them the exact job that they want when they want it, and they're not going to have to wait for it. They're not going to have to work to prove that they can get it. They want their job to be tailored exactly to them, just like the products that they're ordering. So this is something that businesses need to keep in mind when they're hiring new employees, and it's also something that job seekers should keep in mind, that they can't necessarily expect that that experience is going to transfer over. So you can probably see how well this connects to the classroom. This is something that probably at least a few of your students are exhibiting, this desire for instant gratification. So just kind of discussing the topic with students is one way to kind of make them aware of it. They might not even know that this is something new, something that has changed. They might just think that's the way things are. So identifying both new businesses that have sprung up because of this change, and also businesses in their communities that might not necessarily be responding to this change yet, is a great way for them to identify opportunity in their own business community. So they can think about ways that maybe traditional or brick and mortar stores or retail businesses can adapt to this shift in customer needs, and how they can make their processes quicker and get more customized products into the customer's hands. They can also look into types of jobs and industries that are going to grow because of this trend. So if they can think about ways to make that they can make existing products or services more convenient, more personalized, quicker, that's something that could prove an opportunity in the future, and can get them thinking in an entrepreneurial way about the way that new businesses are going to continue to develop because of this. And another thing they can do is they can think about a customer experience that they've had recently with a business, and kind of map it from the first time they encountered the business all the way into their last encounter, and think about ways that that business has tried to either shorten that process or add more customization into that process, and how they can see that business trying to appeal to their desire for instant gratification. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be brought into the classroom. In general, just making students aware of it and showing them the way that these types of changes can be a huge opportunity for businesses is important.
So that information, when you think about the paparazzi project that your students are working on, I mean, I can certainly see how they could talk about how the trend of instant gratification just keeps feeding the paparazzi mania, if you will, to the point where we all just expect if something has happened 5 minutes ago with Justin Timberlake that we are going to see it right now. Mm-hmm. Right? And so they can take that into consideration when they're trying to come up with ways that the stars can avoid being hounded by the paparazzi all the time. You know, another thing that we had talked about in the office too was instant gratification that you might be experiencing from your students, right? So this is as Kristen said, this is a generation that doesn't know anything other than instant gratification. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure that as teachers who do know that there was a time when we couldn't order things and have it at our door in two hours, that times have changed, and those students aren't really familiar with that. So they're likely expecting more from, well, I think they're probably expecting, they have less patience overall with projects that are longer. You might be seeing that in High School of Business, that some of our longer projects, the students get restless easier than maybe their peers would have in a similar classroom situation 20 years ago. They like short little snippets of information and things to be done pretty quickly, and let's move on to the next new thing. So goods and bads to that, of course. I mean, instant gratification is a trend. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing for every project, every circumstance in our lives. But you know, if you're going to address instant gratification from a business perspective in the classroom, you could always start the conversation by talking about their needs for instant gratification. I think also in the econ course is the project The Good Old Days. So that one is all about thinking about how things used to be. So that's one way that you can kind of marry the two different projects within that same course and talk about how it used to be back in the time of the Depression, which is heavily focused on in good old days, versus how things are now in terms of instant gratification. All right, so I hope that those 3 trends have helped you to take a look at those 3 projects a little bit differently. I hope we've provided you with some resources and ideas. I do want to make you aware, too, that the information that they shared with you today comes from action briefs, which are written materials that are composed out of the research that's done here at MBA Research. And those action briefs are accessible to you in the MBA Research website in the States Connection part of the website. So as member states of MBA Research, you have access to materials that are in that member state section of our website, and every action brief that has been written is there. So you're going to find a lot more of this type of thing, and I think the classroom implications section is particularly helpful for educators, and that you'll probably find other trends too that meld really well with what's going on in your high school of business classroom, as well as the other courses that you're teaching. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Are there any questions that anyone has before we sign off? I do appreciate you joining us today, and I really appreciate Holly and Kristen taking the time to connect the work that they do on a regular basis directly to what you're teaching your students in High School of Business. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add really quick, if you are getting on States Connection and accessing the action briefs and you've ever got a question or a comment, feel free to reach out to us and talk further with us about it. We're always happy to share what we know or look into other things based on questions that you might have.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Kristen. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.